Remember back to when you were first learning to swim. How long did it take? Do you remember clutching onto the side of the pool or not wanting to go past your knees or ankles? Starting out by using a foam kickboard, learning to kick with your legs, and eventually going out into the ocean past where you can touch. Do you remember the weird feeling of having no ground below you, nervously trying to tread water, trying to keep your head above the surface as the waves washed over you? Once you've learnt to swim, you forget these experiences, these feelings. It becomes second nature. Diving under the waves and swimming to the jetty becomes fun. But I want you to imagine you can't swim. You've never learnt. You're out in the deep water alone. The waves are getting bigger and bigger, more intimidating, more powerful. The wave is coming down, crushing you. Everything feels as if it's closing in. Your body's trying to fight against the water, but you're not strong enough. You can't seem to keep yourself up. You feel helpless. Everything is out of your control. You are being pulled under. You are being pulled under. You try to breathe, but can't. Everything becomes distant. You try and focus on where you are, how big the waves are, trying to swim to the surface, but you can't. All you can feel is the water surrounding you from every angle, suffocating you. Your ears are ringing, your senses heightened, but everything is a blur as you fade in and out of consciousness. The world spins so fast until you can't take it anymore. Your body can't cope, and you collapse. This is what it feels like when I have a panic attack. I've always struggled with anxiety, but it was at its worst in Year 9. I've never had an experience close to drowning, but every time I had a panic attack or my anxiety became worse, I felt as if I was being pulled underwater, unable to breathe or fight back. My mental health was affecting me significantly, and my body could no longer cope. I was tired and weak all the time, and I would faint whenever it became too much. Because of my anxiety, my body was failing to a point where I ended up in hospital. I had no idea what was wrong with me. At the time, I wasn't aware that anxiety was the cause of these feelings. I felt alone, isolated in this experience. I couldn't imagine anyone understanding what I was going through, and I was too scared to ask for help. Standing here today, I still experience panic attacks, and at the start of this year, I was still terrified of my anxiety. But I also wanted to learn more about it, to understand it beyond my own experience. I chose this for my Year 12 project to find the tools I needed to manage my own anxiety, as well as support younger teenagers by creating practical resources so they could begin to understand and learn how to manage their own experiences. I found that learning about my anxiety and understanding it through a scientific perspective helped me distance myself from it, making it feel less intimidating and overwhelming. I hope that by sharing some of this knowledge as to why we experience anxiety, you will learn something new and gain a deeper understanding of your own or somebody else's experience. Anxiety is your brain trying to protect you from threat. It is a survival response. It is a survival response that is essential when you are in physical danger, because it prepares your body to fight and defend itself or flee to escape the threat. For example, in prehistoric times, humans relied on this fight or flight response as it provided their body with a burst of energy so they could protect themselves against encounters with wild animals without having to make any conscious decision in the moment. Not thinking, just acting to survive. If you can see there, the small part in the brain, in the center, is called the amygdala. and it is associated with fear, responsible for activating this fight or flight response. For people thousands of years ago, their amygdala had to be constantly alert, processing incoming information from their senses and detecting whether or not they were in danger. This survival response is necessary in extreme situations. However, it becomes difficult to deal with when the danger or threat is no longer physical, but instead psychological. For people like us, living in a privileged, developed country, we are much less likely to encounter these kinds of physical threats. However, we are prone to experiencing psychological threats to our self-esteem or identity. Your brain may feel threatened by fears or uncertainties in the future, by triggering thoughts of embarrassment or judgment from others. The thing is, that central part in the brain, the amygdala, is not always able to tell the difference between physical or perceived threat. Meaning, if at any point it believes you are unsafe, it will react to protect you, activating the same fight or flight response, survival response, that it would if you were in physical danger. For example, an example of the brain perceiving a threat that is not technically real is me, coming up here today. Because as someone who struggles with anxiety, standing on this stage before you, my body is in survival mode. There's nothing to be scared of, but still, there is a part of my brain telling me that I'm not safe, that this feels too unfamiliar. It's seeing me right now, standing before a room full of people with all eyes on me, and it's telling the rest of my brain and my body that I'm in danger. This is a perceived threat. My brain is perceiving something that is not real, but my body is reacting anyway, because when under threat, our brain is designed to prioritize survival over rational thinking. In this moment, my heart is racing, beating faster and faster. My hands are shaking and I feel restless. This is because my body thinks it's preparing to either fight or run away from danger, and it's pumping blood to my muscles for strength and power. The butterflies and nausea I've been feeling all morning are because there is no blood flow to my stomach, as digestion isn't a priority when you're protecting yourself from danger. When you're anxious, you might notice your breath becomes faster and shallower. This is because your body is trying to take in as much oxygen as it can to produce energy for you. However, this shortness of breath is what can lead to hyperventilation, making you feel dizzy or faint or like you're unable to breathe. Your muscles tighten to make your body more resilient to physical attack, causing body aches, numbness, or muscle tension. You may feel more sensitive to light, or sounds, or even touch. This is because your senses are sharpened, heightened, so you're more alert. These are just some of the common symptoms of anxiety, but that doesn't mean you have to experience all of them. Everyone's experience of anxiety is different, and the reason I'm sharing this with you is because personally I've found that knowing there is an explanation for my anxiety, especially understanding these physical responses, actually helps me feel less anxious. You may have noticed me placing my hand on my heart. This is something I do almost unconsciously whenever my brain perceives a threat, because feeling my heart beating loudly in my chest reminds me that although I'm feeling anxious or scared, my body is just responding to protect me. Learning about anxiety and understanding how and why it works disempowers it in many ways, without invalidating the experience. And I think there's something important in this way of thinking that could benefit how people view anxiety and other mental health disorders. Anxiety is a part of our human experience that many of us share. We should acknowledge it, understand it, rather than labeling it as a problem that needs to be fixed. The reason I am able to stand up here today without having a panic attack or fainting is because of my prefrontal cortex. It's the part of the brain located in the frontal lobe, and it's thought of as the rational brain. It's responsible for logic, reasoning, attention, and emotional regulation, meaning it has the ability to calm and reassure my amygdala that I'm in fact fine, I'm not in danger. Returning to the ocean, I want you to think of the oncoming waves as threat. Imagine you're looking out towards the sea and you spot a wave that looks big and intimidating from far away. But as it gets closer, it becomes smaller and smaller until it passes you as just a bump in the water. In the brain, this is the prefrontal cortex processing a threat that you're... In the brain, this is the prefrontal cortex processing that the threat your amygdala first perceived as scary is not actually as big or intimidating as you originally thought. I have focused on this relationship between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex because in a teenage brain, the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed, making it more difficult for teenagers to engage their rational brain during times of anxiety. If your prefrontal cortex is not functioning at full capacity, it leaves more responsibility on your amygdala to process sensory information without rational input, making teenagers much more likely to experience anxiety. This particular discovery was incredibly important for my project and my end goal of creating resources that teenagers could use to manage their anxiety. Having learnt that anxiety functions differently in the adolescent brain, I knew that I had to develop tools and techniques that were developmentally appropriate, made specifically for teenagers. I discovered two main approaches that I believe are essential to managing anxiety. The first is a simple approach I call calming the body to clear the mind. It is something you're all already doing right now in this moment, and it is the first thing I would tell anyone struggling with anxiety or panic attacks. Learning to breathe is the foundation to calming anxiety, just like learning to swim is the first step before venturing out into deeper water. Physiologically, it's a very simple and effective way to calm the body, as breathing deeply into your diaphragm will stimulate the vagus nerve, activating what we call the parasympathetic nervous system. This will stabilize your heart rate, relax your muscles, and help your mind and body return to a state of calm. In a moment, I'm going to ask you all to take 2 deep breaths. In through your nose for the count of 4, and out through your mouth. Feel free to participate if you would like, and if you don't feel comfortable, that's fine. But if you're ready, I would like you to all take a deep breath in and out. Again, in and out. Take a second to observe how you feel in this moment. Perhaps you feel lighter or calmer or a little more relaxed. I believe that teenagers especially can benefit from deep breathing as an immediate tool for calming anxiety. By focusing on your breath, you can shift your mind's attention from generating triggering thoughts and instead focus on something real and physical that you can control. I equate this tool to swimming. Once you have learnt to swim, you have the ability to keep your head above the surface, even when the water is rough. And it is the same once you have learnt to breathe through times of anxiety or panic. The action of breathing works by first calming the body's physiological response in order to calm the mind. Engaging the prefrontal cortex and allowing you to think more clearly. Another widely known technique, mindfulness, is another widely known technique for managing anxiety. In its simplest form, mindfulness is defined as a mental state achieved by focusing one's attention and awareness on the present moment while calmly observing and accepting thoughts and feelings. However, if, like me, you find this concept somewhat difficult to grasp, I have worked to reconceptualize mindfulness in a way that I think is achievable for everyone. I encourage anyone, especially teenagers, to practice what I call taking a moment. Consciously taking a moment out of your day to rest your mind is vital in today's world, as our minds rarely have any time to rest or reset. Taking a moment does not mean getting home from school and resting by sitting on your phone or watching a show, because while these things are comforting, they're overstimulating our minds. Instead, try to find something you enjoy, preferably something physical or creative that calms your mind. This could be anything from exercising, moving your body, cooking, weeding the garden, watching a sunset, or making something, being creative. For me personally, I find that going for a walk, or even just something simple like doing the dishes, helps me focus my attention to something practical in the present moment. For me, mindfulness is simply taking a moment for myself to focus on the present moment while doing something that I enjoy. Reaching this state of mindfulness is almost a skill that takes time to learn and practice, and these are just a few ways to help you achieve it. There was an Australian study on mindfulness that found it is an incredibly useful and beneficial skill for people with anxiety. Practicing mindfulness improves connections in the brain. It increases our ability to process sensory information and perceive the world more accurately. Having these skills teaches your brain to view anxiety from a different perspective. You already know how to breathe, to stay afloat in the water, but now you are learning to surf, to ride the crest of the wave rather than feeling trapped underneath it. I hope that by sharing with you what I have learned, there will be at least one person in the audience who has gained a better understanding of their anxiety and is able to view it in a different way. My project wasn't ever about fixing anxiety in myself or in anyone else. I wanted to share my knowledge and help people understand that what they're going through is a universal human experience. We all feel overwhelmed or stressed or anxious at times, and we all deal with it differently. I mentioned at the beginning of my speech, struggled with anxiety and panic attacks in Year 9 and all the way up until this year, and that's not changed. I still deal with anxiety every day in many ways, but the difference is now I'm not as scared of it anymore. Anxiety doesn't go away, but it does become more manageable. Just like the ocean, there are days when the water is flat and glassy, not a wave in sight. Everything is completely still and calm. But there are also times when it's rough, unpredictable, and overwhelming, and that's okay. Writing this speech was one of the most challenging aspects of my project because of my anxiety. And I spent a lot of time avoiding it, scared of how others would perceive me. But I now realised that I needed to do this, to prove to myself that I could, that I am bigger than my anxiety. This project has been a confronting journey of self-discovery. There have been so many points in the year where I wanted to give up, to change my project and do something easier, something less personal, less vulnerable. But I kept remembering back to my Year 9 self, who was too scared to ask for help, even when I needed it the most. I didn't want any other teenager struggling with anxiety to feel like no one understood what they were going through, and I knew I had to share my experience. To anyone who knows what it feels like to be out in the ocean alone, to be pulled under the water, unable to breathe or fight back, know that no matter how scared or isolated you feel, you are not alone in your experience. Thank you. I think I will do questions first, if that works. Yeah? Oh, God.
I just wanted to know what's the best type of medication to take for anxiety?
Medication. I haven't experienced taking any medication. I haven't looked into it. That's something you can ask a doctor. But my little opinion on medication is that it's great if you need it and if it's helpful. But it doesn't teach you anything. It's just something to rely on. I'm not sure if this is helpful for anyone. It doesn't teach you any skills or learn how to cope in the future. It's just something that you rely on in the moment. And if you're relying on something for anxiety, which is something, like people deal with all the time and it doesn't really go away for a lot of people, by pretending that it goes away, I don't think it's very helpful. I don't know if that's good enough. No!
Yeah, thanks for your speech. I thought you'd done very well. I have a brother who suffers from anxiety as well, and he takes Zyprexa. It's a medication.
And it helps some people, and it's really, really good. Yeah. Sorry. You just need the microphone, yeah.
First of all, I'd just like to say bravo. It's a very difficult thing to talk about, and I think you have explained something very, very complicated in a really simple way. So thank you for that. The question I have, and thank you also for taking the courage of standing today. You will change the world, Neerja. You've changed people's lives already today, so thank you. We don't sometimes know the effect we have on people, so thank you. The question I have for you is, would you like to see, what would your opinion be of incorporating some type of acknowledgement of anxiety in Year 9? It's a classic threshold year. And I wonder what your opinion might be and whether that might be something that you might think that a Year 12 student coming to see Year 9s might be effective in supporting, given that that's a common picture in that year.
I think it's difficult. I think when you're in that moment of Year 9, where everything is, you have no awareness of what you're going through. It's just so horrible in that moment. I think the best thing is to not try and fix anyone, even though, Year 9s, you need a lot of support. But I think trying to fix or trying to, even though I've just told you a few things that you should do, trying to tell people what to do is really unhelpful. And I remember not wanting any help. I was almost in denial. So I think just making it an open conversation, this is what everyone says, and making it less scary. I think talking about it in a way that's not so intimidating and it's not a big deal, it's not a big mental health problem, it's just something that we go through and it's kind of like a physiological response. It's something normal. I think talking about it like that makes it a lot less scary. Yeah. So we can say everyone is going through it together, but also teaching kids how we teach about science, teaching them about mental health in that kind of way. I think that's quite helpful for me at least, yeah. Yeah, you can.
Thanks, Neerja. One of the things which I experienced at your showcase was listening to your podcast and reflecting that it was one of the most straightforward and accessible podcasts in this area, which I'd listened to. And I found it to be a really calming experience, as was probably intended. So what I'm interested in is your podcasts and what you have and how people can access them.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't put it in my speech because I didn't have time, but I said I created practical resources. I've got maybe 6 or 7 short and longer audios on Spotify. It is there, it's hard to see. But I made them really just focusing on physical sensations, so movement of breath and being aware of your surroundings or feeling, smelling, sight, listening to something. Because I think that's the only way for teenagers when you're stuck in that headspace of not knowing what to do. I think bringing it back to your body is the only way that you can start to, for me at least, start to clear your mind. So I've developed them to be simple, direct, and almost very short, because I wouldn't have been open-minded to any of this stuff in Year 9, but maybe by just putting it on Spotify and allowing the teenager to experience it if they want, or, click on it or play it if they want to, that's the way to help them learn instead of telling them what to do. So I've made it accessible to everyone. That's kind of what I've done. Yeah. Yeah.
If you have a moment of panic attack when you are in a surrounding lots of people, are you able to do the breathing technique right there and then?
Yes, and yes over there, and yes right here, and link it everywhere. But yeah, I am. I think for me personally, moving away from people is very, very helpful. I like being alone to sort through these things. But also I found this year that I might be surrounded by a classroom or on the bus, sometimes not really on the bus anymore, but all around these people, and I've actually just closed my eyes and breathing, and then it works. And I don't know how to explain to people, but it works so well for me at least. I just sit there, and then it just takes me a moment, and then I realise that I'm all right for a second, and then and get myself out of that confused headspace. Yeah. Hi.
Hi, Neerja. That was fantastic. Thank you for that, the physiological explanation. I think that helps so many of us. The experience of practicing the breath I'm really interested in. So could you share a little bit about perhaps the start of the year and the discipline to go into that counted breath and, like you've just said, doing it right here on the stage today?
Yeah, of course. At the start of the year, I think I was still very struggling, but I was in this headspace where I could think about it in a project kind of way, help to teach others, because I've experienced anxiety for so long. Breathing, I knew, but I didn't understand. People say, oh, if you're feeling anxious, take a few deep breaths. Don't know if anyone really listens to that. We try to, but it's really difficult sometimes. And it's the same with the taking a moment one. Sometimes my version of taking a moment is just sitting outside and breathing, or going for a walk and breathing. And I think learning about it in a way that it's not a chore. I think people think, not breathing necessarily, but the mindfulness of taking a moment part is almost like a chore no one wants to do, and it's not very fun. And I think we need to change it to be something that is just for you, and it's not a chore that you're being told what to do, or do you help it's not something boring that you're being told what to do. It's something for yourself, and I've learnt to just take that moment for myself almost every day. Yeah.
So I'd like to know a comparison compared to what you would do in Year 9 with anxiety compared to now with your knowledge.
Well, I think is it working? In year 9, I didn't have any knowledge. It was just something that was terrifying. I didn't even name it, I don't think. It was only after I got out of it a couple of years later, maybe a year later, in that, like, I was in kind of a bad state. It was when I realised what it was. So back then, I just so confused. I don't know how to explain it. I just, like, there was zero awareness of what was happening, but I was just experiencing all of it. Now, I experience it, and I'm aware that something is happening, but I still, like, have a panic attack, and I'm just freaking out. But there's a tiny part of my brain that's going, I'm actually okay. I'm just feeling these feelings right now. So I think that's the difference. Yeah. Yeah.
Congratulations, Neerja. That was amazing and brave to share such a personal journey. I just wondered whether, after going on the Waldorf journey that you have, whether or not you can see some opportunities even before year 9 that could be embraced by the Steiner curriculum, where we teach young children to breathe and teach them about some of the ways their brain works. I know that it happens in mainstream education, where they talk to children about flipping their lid, and they talk about smelling the flower and blowing out the candle from a very young age. Just wondering whether or not you can see a space or spaces in your own journey where perhaps it would fit into a main lesson?
Yeah. I'm not sure about a specific main lesson, because I know primary school is very difficult, because maybe up until year 7, it's a lot less science or, like, practical science. We might be doing some science lessons, but we know that it's happening. I just, like, bushwalks and stuff. I think from a young age, like kindy, year 5, year 6, I know, like, the Waldorf education is allowing the kids to experience something without telling them what is happening. So that thing of breathing or going for a walk and telling them to smell the roses or look at the sky or look at the birds or play with clay or, beeswax and all these things that we do, I think in some ways that's kind of starting the process. And then I think once we get to high school and our school does do more, we try to do more sex education, mental health education and science. I think it needs to be implemented much earlier in year 8, not just being a conversation, because sometimes that doesn't help, I think, just it being a conversation that we talk about in Guardian. but like something that we learn about almost like it's a subject. Like we learn about English and we learn how to read and do these things through high school, and then we do essays. We learn how to breathe and we learn how to take moments in primary school without us being aware of it. And then in high school, I don't know, maybe it's just me, I find it so interesting to learn about the brain and learn about the body. And so maybe, like, thinking of mental health as less of a conversation and something to talk about and be aware of. It's something that we actually learn. That's just, this is fact. This is what happens. You will experience this most likely. Yeah, I think that would help. Do I have time for very quick thank yous? Yeah? Okay. So I wrote these very quickly before. I'm just going to kind of wing it a little bit. I want to thank Rose for supporting us, for supporting me all through the year. I want to thank Eleanor especially for helping me I don't know how to explain this, but you've helped me more than I can imagine through, in year 9, all my panic attacks. This year, all my panic attacks. You were always there and just to chat or sit on the bathroom floor when I needed, so thank you. I'm not sure if she's here today, but I'm going to thank Sarah because she came down here, and she's been with us. She was with us all through primary school for half of our lives. And I think it's very, very special that she's come here to support us today and yesterday. Hi! to Mark, I feel like everyone's saying the same thing. You're so great. You always have a smile, and that is your best quality, always. Thanks for being great for these 5 years, even if we've had some issues sometimes. I don't know. I want to say thank you to Grace for being the best, caring, most motivating, coolest supervisor ever. Thank you for always having a smile as well, and always being motivating and bringing us encouragement snacks, because that was great. Thank you. Sorry. To my mum and dad. To my whole family for working together and supporting me, making me food, making me coffees, bringing me snacks, driving me everywhere. Thank you so much. And lastly, I want to thank my friends / my class, but especially a few people who have been my emotional support for everything and have helped me rewrite and keep writing my thesis and my speech, and have asked me if I'm okay very, very, very many times because I wasn't. Thank you to the class just in general for having great chats in the kitchen and just being great. Thank you so much. Thanks. Very well. I need to get